Welcome, guys. And my name is Anson Wu. I'll be your co-host today. Welcome to a panel discussion for entrepreneurs. Today's topic is finding opportunities in unexpected change. I don't know about you guys, but things have changed drastically for myself too. So if you guys can relate, you guys looking for new opportunity, this is the right spot to be. So today I'm super excited. We have four awesome rock stars entrepreneurs joining us at the panel. I want to first introduce, many of you know him already, Dr. Benjamin Ritter, founder and CEO of LFY Consulting, who is also the co-host for this event. Ben, how are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much, Anson, for facilitating. I know we've been looking for opportunities to work together, and this just seems just like a perfect fit, especially for your audience of entrepreneurs. I am a solopreneur. I am, doing the marketing and the sales, and I'm still making social media graphics and, facilitating events and sending emails. But I really focus in the space of leadership and development, leadership empowerment. I mainly work with organizations and people to help them create careers that they can love. So if that's through individual one-on-one coaching or through corporate workshops, that's kind of my jam. And if you have questions about that, feel free to, put them in the chat or find me afterwards. But one of the things that I love to do, something that is like truly aligned with who I am as an individual, is bringing people together for opportunities to connect and to grow. And so I've been hosting events, and I mentioned earlier, for about 4 years now. And I always look for ways to add value to current events. And right now we are all going through unexpected change. Even if you are not an entrepreneur, life is drastically different. But change is a constant. We are always going through change. And I'm, again, really, really excited to hear, from our experts on the panel tonight about how they are creating opportunities in their life. So I'd love to turn it over to some of our other panelists to introduce themselves as well.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for putting this together for us too. Next, we have Christie Lyon, founder and CEO of 4 Point Consulting. Christie, how are you doing? Thanks for joining us today.
Hello, everybody. So great to be here. And thank you, Ben and Anson, for hosting. Again, my name is Christie Lyons. I own and run a small firm called 4 Point Consulting, and we specialize in everything people. So from the boring HR of payroll and benefits to the sexy HR of performance management and engagement to recruiting, executive search, and everything in between. And we focus a lot with startups and middle market businesses. So tonight I'm hoping to bring a perspective of a business owner and entrepreneur, but also as somebody who works a lot with entrepreneurs side by side, day in and day out, and all of their energy. And I'm coming at you from San Jose. So because, midst of all of this, while COVID was ramping up, I also moved to San Jose. So I am an expert in change right now. Not really, but let's pretend on a personal and professional level. And it's so great. And Shay, I echo what you said at the beginning before other people were joining, of how cool is it that me in San Jose and Shay in the UK are getting an opportunity to connect. And that's something I hope we keep after all of this. Thank you so much.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Christie. Thank you so much for joining us. Next, we have John Thackeray, CEO and founder of Framework IT. John, are you here with us? Hey, John, I think you're mute right now.
Yeah, I was trying to make sure that the primary job that I have is full-time father didn't just distract the virtual event here. And so, my name is John Thackeray. Thanks for having me. I alluded to my first job as full-time CEO of my daughter, but ultimately, I serve as the CEO of Framework IT. And in simple part, we deliver predictable IT outcomes. Typically, people have as much anxiety dealing with IT as they do with dealing with the dentist. And ultimately, Framework has created a really unique model. We've been able to grow really quickly, I think, mostly because we've adapted. I think some of the unique perspective to this discussion is really uniquely held by kind of the folks that have experienced Framework, mostly because we were founded out of the last financial crisis. And so almost a lot of the things that I'm dealing with in terms of some of the one-on-one coaching and mentoring I'm doing, and certainly hopefully the perspective that I'll be able to bring today is one that came from, Framework is certainly in the clear and has grown significantly since the last financial crisis, but I feel like a lot of the things that I learned in that have certainly been helpful through this as well.
Well, that's amazing. You're a busy person, a busy man, I see. Welcome. Thanks for joining us, John. Next, we have Olivia Wong, co-founder of Prototype Thinking Labs. Olivia, how are you doing? From Vancouver, actually, right?
Yes, thank you so much. I am calling in from Vancouver, Canada, but I'm American, born in San Francisco, raised in San Francisco, lived in Silicon Valley for most of my life. I guess this is the part where I introduce myself. So hi, everyone. It's so nice to meet you. Thank you for being here at 12 o'clock in London or 6 p.m. Central Time. I really appreciate you being here. A little bit about me. I run an innovation consultancy, and we teach a method that comes from Google X. So that's the moonshot factory of Google, where they develop things like self-driving cars and Project Loon. And the technique that I teach, we usually teach it to corporate teams, mostly Fortune 500. But ever since the pandemic started, I've been helping entrepreneurs, freelance business owners test and prototype new revenue streams, because we all need money and we need cash immediately and quickly. So I've worked with over 400 entrepreneurs since this started a few weeks ago, and it's been incredible. I've seen people pivot their business in under 36 hours and relaunch in 3 days. And I have a number of people who I've worked with who have made new income, building new products and services that are really adjusting and staying relevant to what's going on in the news. So I'm really excited to be here, and I can't wait to share, because I actually, previously before this, I was a disaster responder. So my world was solving crises when they happen, and this is really very, very common and comfortable for me.
Wow. Well, we can't wait to hear your stories.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank you so
Anson.
much for joining us. So the way we structure our panel discussion is I will ask our panelists predefined questions that we have, but then we also leave time for Q&A. So at the meantime, while our panelists answering questions, feel free to go to the chat, guys, and putting your follow-up questions. We'll monitor them, we'll ask them for you guys. And then after the questions, we have a open up to the audience, so you guys also ask questions as well. So I'm going to give a virtual applause to our panelists. Thanks for joining. So first question, really, thinking about the unexpected change overall, how has it impacted your career as an entrepreneur? I think that's really general questions. And obviously, as an entrepreneur, myself included, I have been through unexpected changes throughout my entire career, from building first, second, third companies. So I'm super curious, how has it impacted you guys? Ben, you want to take the lead on this?
I think just off the bat, and I will just put words in everyone else's mouth, that change has just created growth and new opportunities. Every time change has happened in my career as an entrepreneur, it was just a learning point. And I work with a lot of pre-entrepreneurs, right? People that are entrepreneurs or people that are thinking about starting a business. And to just drive home that your first business is probably not going to be your last business. And you probably will start multiple things in the future. So what you think, what you're so worried about right now is just the start of everything else that you're going to create. And change just is an opportunity for you to learn more about yourself, and also to test out your skills as an entrepreneur and learn new things. So just a simple kind of overhanging comment. I'll open up to the panel if they have anything to add, just in relationships to their career.
That's a great start. What do you think, Christie?
Sure. So I am a fortunate entrepreneur that an outside change factor, actually 2 of them changed my life. I was doing HR and talent consulting on my own, and I have a client in Abilene, Texas, which if you've never heard of it, that's okay. It's about 2 hours outside of Dallas, Fort Worth. They're actually still a client to this day, and they had called me to go down to Abilene for their performance reviews. And they said, hey, would you consider staying a whole week? And I said, sure, but why? And they said, well, we really enjoy working with you, and we'd like you to introduce you to our clients. And in that week, they meant what they said, and they introduced me to 6 new companies, 5 of which then became clients. And so that was when I made the change decision to hire somebody and take 4 points to the next level. And then about a year later, so that was in January of 2017, and a year later in January 2018, I had a mentor of mine introduce me to what became our first venture capital firm client, which also changed my life and changed 4 Point from 6 people to 18. Oh, Anson, I think you might still be on mute.
As every change's been a step up for you, that sounds pretty amazing, Christie. That's great.
Those were 2 big changes that led me to ask myself a lot of questions. I will say with change, I think with age as well, and as greater responsibility with a larger company, I think over change a lot faster. I think that when it presents itself, I now am a little bit more thoughtful about it, but it's natural to react to change quickly and think later. And so I understand that perspective as well.
Do you feel like it's changing more frequently now or changing less frequently as you're developing your companies? You started from one person, now you have a number of employees and you're growing a bigger team. Do you find that more frequent or less frequent now?
Sure. So something I've spoken about with my management team and with our clients as well is being cognizant that right now change is every day for people, whether it's a potentially scary phone call from a family member or whether it's a change in your work environment, your company announces rifts. It's very real. And we use the phrase above or below the line at 4 Point. Above the line are those days where you're crushing it. You can do anything. You can run a 5-minute mile. Below the line are the days where you're like, I just want to stay in bed and watch Mean Girls over and over. And so we use that phrase a lot, and we're acknowledging that for employees, usually people go in like longer spurts, but that can even change daily.
Very good tip. Very good tip. Thank you, Christie. John, how are you doing? Can you jump in on this topic really quick? What do you think?
Sure. Maybe to speak more specifically to kind of what's happened most recently. The reality of it is that Framework grew 82% last year. A couple of years ago, we were one of 9 Chicago companies to make Inc. 500. We were one of the only company to stay on that list the following year. And so most of our time at Framework has been outside of when we first started, quite frankly, has been as we would describe as peacetime. And I joked with Olivia, who I know outside of this, that I've really had to shift from cardigan wearing Mr. Rogers CEO to General Patton in my approach. It's really caused me to focus in on weaknesses that I knew existed, but because we were so profitable, I kind of just let slide. I won't highlight those because my wife can still hear me from where I'm sitting right now, but all joking aside, from a raw perspective, I've acted more quickly. I'm challenged every assumption in my business. The reality of it is that the opportunity has kind of come from that as well. We've just gotten way better. I've never been higher about Framework and its trajectory, even though I just highlighted all the success we've had prior to this. So in April or March, it was the first month, and quite frankly, probably 4 or 5 years. I can't exactly remember how many months, but it was the first month we weren't profitable. April was the first time that we'd had 2 months consecutively that it looked kind of like that. And so, but here we are in May, and we've already, even though we weren't profitable in March, we still grew 70%. So I was still able to see a lot of silver lining in all of that. But nonetheless, the reality of it is we've gotten better because of it, because we forced ourselves to change assumptions. And we've also been able to see opportunities that I won't highlight specifically here, because I know we'll probably get into it a little bit more, but at least from a personal standpoint, that's how I've kind of responded to this most recent change.
That's good. That's good. So I think that part of the lesson is being adaptable, right? Like change is going to happen anyway. I think you have the adaptability, so you can go with it. You can actually excel from those changes that happen within your company.
I think since the beginning of time, for sure. I think that's absolutely the name of the game. I think the perspective you have is really what I think probably is the foundational purpose of this conversation today. So hopefully that gives some perspective, at least to what I've done personally.
That's pretty cool. Thanks, John. Olivia, how are you doing? What do you think so far about this topic?
Okay, well, what I think is, I don't know if this is the right question, because how has change not impacted your career as an entrepreneur? Like, is the actual question. We're in an industry, if you're an entrepreneur, you're a business owner, every single day you face uncertainty. That is your job. Your job is to solve for risk. It's to mitigate the unknowns, and it's to figure things out day to day. And you don't have a roadmap. You don't have someone who you can just talk to and like pick up the phone and say, hey, I know you did this 7 years ago. Like, tell me everything you did. Being an entrepreneur is about being innovative. And the only thing about innovation that is different from any type of industry in learning is that to truly be innovative, you have to solve for the unknown unknowns. And you can't use the same logic as someone else. Let's say, for example, you're asked to build a bridge. Like, we know how to do that. We can ask someone who's done it. You can write down the specs. You can give it to someone and it's pretty much guaranteed to work. But being an entrepreneur and being an innovator means you don't get to use that same logic because the problem you're solving has never been solved before. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in this industry. And if you are, then you're in a saturated industry. So I like this question because it challenges the concept of change. It's inevitable. It is built into the DNA of your job. And if you don't like it, then you're probably not in the right industry. But if you do, then you know you're in the right place, because people who love chasing risk, people who love pushing the unknown and playing at their edge, those are the truly, truly, truly gifted entrepreneurs. And I think that's why you're here today. Like, you want to know how to navigate this uncertain time, this unprecedented moment in modern history. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be online on Zoom at 6 p.m. or 9 p.m. Or Shay, who's in London right now. It's the middle of the night. Like, why are you here? You want to know how to do this. So I think if you're thinking about change and you're scared of it, take it slow, because it's a long journey. Being an entrepreneur is facing it every single step of the way.
Do you think with time, people would get used to, as an entrepreneur, as you're seeing more changes over time, does it get less scarier every time or get more scary?
Absolutely. So being adaptable and being able to be very agile and lean is a muscle. You have to practice it. If you're not good at moving quickly and being nimble, it will take you a longer time. If you're attached to your ideas, it will take you a longer time to move forward, to find something that people want, to find product market fit. But the thing is, if you do the scary things up front, like you change your business, you pivot, you take a risk, it's never as bad as the first time. So like I always tell founders that I work with that it's really scary to put yourself out there the very first time, because you're always afraid that someone's going to tell you, oh, that's like a terrible idea, or like that's a shit job that you did. And then once someone tells you that, it's never going to be as bad. So just try to bear the brunt of it. It gets easier along the way, or else you get better at it because you're learning compounds over time and you understand how to solve for that change or uncertainty.
That's a really good tip. Looking at the other side of the same problem is the world's constantly changing around us, and we have to decide when to pivot, when not to pivot, when to persist. So when do you guys decide, be like, hey, you know what, even though the situation isn't ideal right now, but I'm going to be persistent. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. How do you decide when to pivot, when not to change or pivot? Looking at externally. And open up to anybody want to raise your hand, and if not, go back to Ben.
I'll jump
Christie,
in.
Go ahead.
Christie's going.
Yeah, so I was going to say, I love what Olivia's saying, and I also can say that like change fatigue is real. And if you're a solopreneur like Ben, you can be within your own change, like happiness. But once you have employees, understanding that people don't like change. Like, let's just throw that out there. From my toddler who doesn't like if I put vegetables and black beans in his mac and cheese because it's good for him. He just wants his mac and cheese to how it is, to your employees who they want their mac and cheese. They want their normal thing, right? And so understanding as an entrepreneur how to take all of your energy and that muscle that you have and that you love and that you've worked out, and understanding when to channel that and when to distribute it, I think is a huge key regarding success as well. And if you're influencing other people, just understanding that their change tolerance might not be where yours is at. And that is a very powerful thing to realize.
That's a very good point, Christie. I want to dig a little bit deeper with the change management that you talked about. having employees or contractors sometimes too, when you change a process, you would have to explain and also incentivize them to also change with you. And you being HR, maybe have some additional advice for people that are in this, pivoting moment. What have you seen that's been working effectively, and what are the common mistakes that you think people would make in this kind of change management?
Well, I have two perspectives. I have my HR perspective and I have my CEO perspective, but I think John and Ben both kind of wanted to jump into, and I think Ben is a solopreneur, and then John, who also probably has employees, like they're good perspectives of where you stumble. I think my biggest themes with change and entrepreneurship and my energy level is transparency. And that's a key competency that when I went through executive coaching through 2018, that was my number one of 3 competencies we were working on, was transparency and knowing when I'm oversharing and knowing when I'm undersharing. And I think in times of change, oversharing to your probably discomfort, if you're an entrepreneur and a type A, and let's be honest, you all got A's, you all were like the person bringing you were the teacher's pet probably, and, you were always overachieving. And now you might have to even be uncomfortable to say to people, and people you likely care about very much, that, you are certainly not failing as an entrepreneur. You are coping as best you can with an unprecedented economic, social, and political situation. And that takes you out of your comfort zone. But I'll also defer because I think a few other people on the panel want to chat.
Yeah, thank you, Christie. Ben, did you want to add something?
Just outside of the team conversation, because I will fully admit, being a solopreneur, like, change for me just feels like founding 2 businesses that didn't work out. Like, change for me is a constant. I'm always testing and seeing what's working, what's not working. If, and lucky for me, like, I have no overhead, right? I'm a service-based business. So if a message isn't working, or clients have to back out from contracts, which didn't happen because luckily I work in like a really good space right now for this type of change, right? Pivots and career development and such. Then I will just change my message and look at a different market. So I think change for me as a solopreneur is very much just the basis of my entire career so far, right? I'm always constantly testing, reevaluating, and checking in with myself each month, like what's working, what's not working. And if I'm not changing, right, I'm not succeeding, I'm not scaling, I'm not growing, I'm not serving myself as well as the people I'm working with. And so, I fully like will admit that, change for a lot of people right now, and even some of my clients, is letting go 30% of their workforce, losing their own job, losing, a huge percent of their retirement savings. And so, like, I'm not experiencing that, right? I know it's out there, and I want to fully call that out because those are real things that people have to deal with right now. And I don't think you can ever get used to having to let go, someone from a job. I don't think you can ever get, used to something that is traumatic as a change that is going on right now. But, you can say, hey, this sucks. You can call it out, but then you can say, okay, so now what, right? What are my resources? What are my strengths? Like, what do I offer? What's a need in the market right now? How do I align all those together and start being proactive? Right. So like dealing with the trauma and then creating a way for you to feel safe again so you can move forwards, which is kind of, luckily what I can do pretty nimbly kind of with my current business operation. And I'm sure John has a very, very different perspective on this as well.
I'm not sure how different it is. I think maybe to answer your original question, Anson, like, you talked about change, you talked about persistence, when to persist. I think data is really powerful. And so humans are really, really, really good at recognizing patterns, but we're really, really, really good at recognizing terrible patterns that don't really exist either, right? And so having data to really drive on, I think, is an important component. And so that's kind of one perspective and one piece of advice I'd give on change, and when to persist versus when to kind of pivot. And that means different things for different people's organizations. But what I would also say to the factor of change is, like, inherent in change is failure. Like, as you're trying new things, you'll fail, right? Like, Olivia and I met like 5 or 6 years ago, and we went through a rapid prototyping kind of seminar, you might recall, Olivia, and right, like, the function of it, like, one of the underpinning components to this is for you to learn more things and do more things, you're likely to also fail more times. So I failed so many times. Use the word failure and change. I failed so many times. It's not even a bad word to me. It literally has lost negative connotation. When I hear the word failure or change, I literally just hear market research. I do think there is some consideration to it being easier and being able to deal with it and manage it. So a couple perspectives on those things. And I think I heard a third kind of topic that I think is maybe worth addressing in terms of just, your size and adaptability. So I think adaptability is a talent and a skill. I think it can be learned. I think you can get better at it. And I think ultimately as an organizational leader, especially with like a rapid growing organization, I think it's a culture that you can build. I oftentimes, I've been involved in every single framework hire. And I oftentimes give an analogy of what it's like to work at Framework. So certainly we have roles, certainly we have responsibilities. We want them to be focused. We want to try to create as much transparency and kind of predictability as possible. But when you're growing at the rates that we were growing, and if you're dealing with the world that we're dealing with in an industry that changes as quickly as technology services does, I've always given the analogy, there's two types of jobs, and to work at Framework is to look at this paradigm. If I were to tell everybody on this Zoom call, hey, I have my computer, my folder, my laptop bag, and my daughter's zebra, what doesn't fit here? That's a pretty obvious question, right? But if I were to give those first three things and say, hey, what's missing, right? Then that gives a much different answer. And so I always give the analogy to work at Framework. And so we self-screen for folks that are really more tolerant to being able to be more adaptable, be more change-worthy. And so as a function, I think of like the labor market shifting. My advice, especially for those who have employees and that are shifting their models, I think it's a time to consider shifting your labor force, whether or not you're laying off your current force or not. It's a time to improve your team to ultimately make yourself as survivable and your organization as survivable as possible.
Thanks, John. That is something that's really inspiring too. How you took the company from when you started to what you're doing right now. Thank you for sharing.
I definitely didn't do that. What you learn when you do something like that is that you have a ton of people that are helping you along the way. And so I joke still that I'm the CEO of an IT services company, and I am not the guy you're going to call to fix your computer. You can still call the number on my business card, but I'm still not the guy you call. So it requires team, but nonetheless.
That's awesome. Olivia, do you have any thoughts on this topic?
No, let's move on to the next one. What else do you got?
I want to, so Ben talked about the messaging, and I think I want to dive into the fact that every entrepreneur needs to be able to sell, right? You sell to investors, your customers, your clients, your vendor, so on and so forth. This is a strange time to be, selling hard. Some people may think. I want to hear from you guys. How have you been dealing with this new norm, selling, closing deals? If entrepreneur out there thinking that, well, is it almost wrong to sell so hard in this difficult time? What would you say to that? Anybody want to jump into this? All right, go ahead.
Go ahead, Christie.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, Olivia, you first. We haven't heard from you in a while. And I love the sleeves on your shirt. I'm a big fan, by the way.
Yes, very big and poofy.
I like
sure. I'll try to keep this short. I know we've got a lot to cover today.
Right.
First things off, people right now are the most price sensitive than they'll ever be in their entire lives. We used to have a trade-off number, $500, you don't have to ask your husband or wife, right? Like that's an easy number. You can make that purchase as a consumer. Now what we're seeing is the numbers are a lot lower, $100 to $200, and people have to think about what that's costing. What are they trading in order to purchase that? But this doesn't mean that you should stop selling. What it actually means is you have access to a much wider audience. Anyone in the world can buy your products and services now. You're not just restricted to your hometown or your home city or your province or your state or your country. You can sell globally. You have a much wider audience. But the things to keep in mind are that more than ever, people want to see your impact, what you're doing in the world to create positive change. If you are selling a product from a place of self-interest, you're going to rub people the wrong way. People are very sensitive right now. No one wants to see another Peloton ad. Do you want to see another Peloton ad? Why do we need a $3,000 bike right now? It makes no sense. What we really want to see from brands is loyalty. As a consumer, what we're looking for is a brand that understands us. Like, how do we relate to that brand? How do they understand what's going on day to day? And how can they continue to be part of our story and evolve with us as this pandemic shakes out for the foreseeable few months or even possibly 1 to 2 years? And so at our company, Prototype Thinking Labs, we have actually been selling more and faster and closing deals quicker than we've ever done. Usually we sell B2B to enterprise. That would take us anywhere from 3 months to 2 years to close a deal. We closed a deal a couple of weeks ago in about 7 days. The reason being, this time is a period where people really are actually understanding what they want. Yes, their habits are changing. Yes, their consumer patterns are changing. How they consume, purchase, and use products and services is changing, but people are actually very clear on what they need right now. So my suggestion is understand why certain things are selling. Like, be the toilet paper, be the product that is just selling off shelves because it's relevant. And the only way to stay relevant when you're selling and marketing is to be part of that conversation and be really in tune with your customers' needs. Like, this isn't a time for you to just send an email and every single email that you send is a hard sell. You should be having a conversation with your customers on the daily, in your Facebook groups, in your LinkedIn groups, like on social media. What do you want? What's relevant to you now? The thing that I just launched last week, like, what were the successes? What were the challenges? And you're having that conversation with your customers, but also with your team to stay relevant. And as long as you push communication and you get ahead of the conversation, because a lot of our competitors right now are stuck. Like, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to have that conversation that feels genuine and authentic and pure and sincere and wholesome. And so they're just not saying anything. And what's happening to them? They're going to be left behind, because by the time your customers are ready to purchase from a vendor like you, they're going to purchase from people that they know and they trust and they have an existing relationship with. So if you want to sell, stop thinking about selling and just start thinking about communicating and being a cultural thought leader in your space.
Thanks for
I completely echo what Olivia is saying. Is, as I was making notes about this, is my general sentiment, which is not as eloquent as how Olivia just said it, was don't be tone deaf, right? And, you know, I know from our standpoint, we're getting emails from law firms and benefits brokers and other people that normally I consider to be strategic partners, and they're still having email marketing that says things like mitigating COVID-19. Delete, never going to open that. You need to connect on a more genuine level. You need to build relationships. You need to put in the time that people aren't used to putting in anymore in 2020. So one of my charges to my team, as we watched a number of our clients go on pause, I won't pretend we don't, is build those relationships. Those are real people. Those are people that you went to college with, or you found out you guys have the same favorite sports team, or you have the same favorite cocktail or food or whatever it is. And those were all things we already learned from being in a client-vendor relationship, and build on those. And so what we've been told from our clients is the differentiator is we are building those relationships, and we are saying like, hey, not billable people, like, we just want to have happy hour with you virtually to know that you guys are all okay as people. And we then come in with a game or something fun, and we're really building those relationships, which are turning into those professional friendships. I think also something I wanted to share was one of the best pieces of advice my father gave me. Is unfortunate, I grew up with a sales guy, and he reminded me when all this started of, Christie, only ask the questions you actually want answers to. And so if you say to a customer or potential customer, how can I help you? They're going to say, well, how about the first month for free? Or how about a 50% discount? And then you say, well, hey, Joe Smith, I'm suffering too. Like, that's not really okay. And then they're actually going to leave the table angry, because you never actually intended to help them in their perspective. And so in a crisis right now, the worst thing you can say to a customer, potential customer, is how can I help you? Be more specific. And what my father said to me was, liken it is like if you've ever had someone close to you who lost somebody. You don't say, how are you? Or are you okay? You say, I'm going to babysit your kids on Saturday night, so you have a night off. I'm going to bring over dinner on Tuesday night, so you and your husband can relax and you can have a casserole for the rest of the week. you go in with a very specific solution. And so treating your customers with that level that you would a friend going through a crisis will really help you to sell. And those can still go together, that genuine relationship and that sale. That's okay. That's not a dirty relationship. That's still a good thing.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. Thank you for sharing, Christy and Olivia. Ben, John, do you guys have anything to add?
I suppose I just take a different perspective to this, not an opposing perspective, but the reality is the service that we kind of provide and what we do for who we do it. So a lot of our clients here are hospitals here in the Chicagoland area, as an example. And so the recognition of what we do is, to a certain extent, the conversation that I have with our staff is, we feel a certain mission and responsibility to the community. And so we've been wrestling more with the fact of self-imposition of kind of protecting our staff and weighing their health versus community. And so to a certain extent, we're looking at it a little bit differently. But I do think everything that Christy and Olivia share is real perspective. But I think overall, like, we're doubling down, we're getting more aggressive. And in some regards, your voice is louder while everyone else is retreating. Depending on what you're doing and how you're doing it, I do think it's tricky, right? Like, I got an email for playground services this morning, and it's just like, I don't know how to react to that right now. But all joking aside, I think your service is going to dictate your response and how you manage it. But it's impossible to not take into account what people are dealing with compassionately, what people are dealing with their businesses. But one tactic that I think is important, especially for semi-mature businesses, or if you got a sizable book of business, you should be calling everyone your clients, having a discussion with them. I think Christy gave some really great advice, so I don't want to regurgitate that. Nonetheless, though, if you're not doing a risk assessment of your clients, compassionate or otherwise, I certainly think that is an easy step to take, and it behooves you not to.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, thank you, John.
Yeah, I heard something on there was a post on LinkedIn the other day which kind of pushed me the wrong way, and it was like, if one more person tries to sell me something during right now, I can't believe that people are trying to sell during this day and age. And I'm like, did you go to the grocery store today? Did you Grubhub? Did you Amazon Prime? Like, you're buying things, right? And I think it's how you sell, which is so important right now. And I think everyone has been talking about that so far in the panel, and I think overall, if you're not selling in a way that's connecting and building a relationship, you're probably missing out on a lot of sales anyways. This is just another time where you're going to need to connect with individuals on what they're currently going through, and then orient your product or service in a way that fits their need, where they can see that you're actually going to have an impact. I mean, and if you're in an industry right now where you're not selling, so, I sell a luxury good, right? High ticket one-on-one coaching. So it's like some people now that used to maybe be able to afford coaching can't. And, I have to decide, like, okay, so what am I going to do for my main target market, right? One, I'm going to find a new target market. So I'm going to find individuals that actually have the money right now to spend on coaching, that want to spend the money on coaching. But then I'm also going to create services for my normal target market, because they're not going anywhere. They're still interested in my business. They're still part of my audience. And so if you have downtime, create an event, create a new ebook, which I did, what sort of value can you give to your customers right now in this space, right? Because selling is building a relationship. And if you can create an impact right now during a time of crisis, all you're doing is basically pulling them closer towards you, so they think of you when they are ready to buy. I don't think that if someone isn't going to buy from you, it doesn't automatically exclude them from someone that's important to build a relationship with. And so this is a really great opportunity right now for anyone that is trying to sell to clients to reach their target market in a way that's going to leave an impact. And that doesn't mean quantity, right? It's not flooding people's inboxes. It's actually producing something of quality that adds value to their life right now.
Yeah. I want to echo off of Ben's point, please. So we've had really good success with our business of being that we're in HR and talent. We've created state-by-state return to work toolkits. They are completely free. If you have a state you're interested in, please contact me. Our main premise is that we care that people are safe and healthy at work and comfortable to tell their employers that they don't feel safe and healthy. and us to try and figure that out, because OSHA and the Department of Labor have been really quiet, and those are the people who govern all this. And so we've been trying to just be helpful. And so with whatever your product is, if you have something like that, toolkit seems to be the big lingo right now. Another big lingo word we hear in Silicon Valley is playbook. So if you have an opportunity to make one of those go over really well. And it can be, again, a good way to genuinely open those doors and those conversations, to do those assessments like John talked about, to talk to people about what are you looking for now. So some effort that maybe you did, for free, like toolkit or a playbook, can then open that door to get you that conversation, to rebuild those relationships. And I know for us, like when we had clients go what we call dormant or on pause, when we started to make these toolkits and these playbooks and they were free of charge, it really opened the doors of like, well, yeah, I'll have happy hour with you guys on Zoom because you did this. And now we understand that we better be ordering masks from Amazon Prime before we go back to back to the office. And so it's been a win-win situation, and has also even taken some of my staff members out of their comfort zone, where I said, hey, remember how you were resisting learning how to use Canva or design in PowerPoint? Now you're going to learn.
Yeah, no, I think I gave a little bit of a lazy answer, and I certainly feel like there's a couple more thoughts of value that I can prescribe here. So one, like to Ben's point, Ben kind of highlighted a blue chip analysis. It's going to be premium that you're providing value more now than ever. And the best way to do that is to find who in your market you already provide the most value to. And so go to your A and B clients, because that's what you're going to be able to hit. You're going to get less pitches to swing at. I know, Olivia, you're in Canada, but you were in America long enough to get the analogy, and I always hate sports analogies, but you're going to get less pitches to swing at. So you got to make sure you're swinging at the right pitches. And so it's important to do a blue chip analysis, really kind of understand who you're providing the most value to, who's your most profitable client, who's happiest with your service, et cetera. The other component of this is now, in a time like probably since 9/11, right, or whatever, like there are foundational moments in time, and this is one of those where you now can capture goodwill and brand value in ways that you would not be able to. And so you can cement client relationships and reduce churn, especially for software SaaS-like entrepreneurs that are seeking that type of a model or subscription model. This is a time to being able to like truly understand those blue chips, if you will, right? And then go after them. And right now, like true sales is retention. It really is just a means of being able to retain as much as you can. And so in my mind, like the way to really do that is to take advantage of this brand, of this crisis, and the way that you can be there for clients in ways that without this, you couldn't be there for. You can ask questions that you couldn't ask. You might be able to even go to clients now that have more time on their hands for that client review or referral or, a rating or whatever on Google or Yelp or whatever platforms that are important for your marketing. And so I think there are a lot of things that this kind of presents in terms of not necessarily needing to just sell to new clients per se, but also taking perspective to build brand and goodwill and true relationship value that I think Christie hit on in ways that you couldn't without having the opportunity to be there for someone in peacetime, as I kind of think of it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think people don't like to be sold, but they love shopping, right? And as long as you're providing good values, good benefit for them, I think one point I would add is, as an entrepreneur, sometimes I do feel like I provide a lot of values and a lot of the almost like a free services sometimes. And when it comes to closing, a lot of the beginner entrepreneurs, they have trouble just putting a foot down and asking for the sale. And I think knowing when to ask for the sale and you have full confidence your product or service is going to benefit your client and customers, there's nothing to be afraid of, right? Like you are doing so much for them, and you should be able to ask for the sale. That's great. Thank you for all your inputs. So moving on a little bit, we touched on the management a little bit before. So I'm super curious, how do you guys lead your team through this crisis and crisis before that? For entrepreneurs that's building their team for the first time and seeing these changes, what advice would you give them when they encounter something they themselves not sure what to do, right? I know one of you talk about transparency. I think that's absolutely critical. What else can we add to that equation to make that crisis management a little bit easier for everybody? Anyone hop on the questions?
Yeah, I would, even though I don't have a team, I work with a lot of leaders that have teams. And so a couple bullet points, Christie talked about transparency, communication. Now more than ever, you need to, communicate what's going on, what's going to happen. Generally just touch base and connect. But then also this is a huge opportunity, which a lot of leaders are forgetting about, for recognition. A lot of associates are struggling with a lack of recognition from their leadership right now because of the breakdown in terms of structured communication, or realizing that despite being in crisis mode, people still need to feel good about their work. I'd also say training. A lot of employees have been stuck at home working remote, but might not have used Zoom in the past, or maybe they haven't used Teams or known how to communicate in other ways other than just email. So figuring out new processes as well as training for how you're going to communicate and do your job, I think, are really important to help people also feel good about their work and like they can do their work. And then also giving space for people to restructure their lives and their work. So as a leader, really ensuring that your associates have what they need, and also understand that now being at home is going to create a very different mentality associated with work, and bringing up those topics, providing those resources, even maybe bringing in speakers for webinars to discuss, maybe using a work cup when you're at work and not using that work cup when you're not at work, like really trying to define what the workday is and creating those boundaries for mental health.
I agree with a lot of what Ben's saying, and transparency and communication are key. But something else I had said to me by a mentor too, which also really helped me through this, was a lot lives in your head as a business owner and an entrepreneur. And I think what's really unique about this current pandemic is we're seeing personal and work just be so intertwined. And I don't know about you guys, but I feel like I've gone through the 5 phases of grief with certain things on my personal life and then things in my work life, right? Not to, I remember even, on a superficial level, I found this great gym here in San Jose that had like 3 hours of free childcare a day. And then the very next day it was closed. And I was like, that was my place. Like, that was going to be my little saying. So not to be too superficial, but just even thinking about you're going through both. And I think one of the best coaching points I ever had was, if you're a business owner and you have a team member or contractors, there's so much living up here. And by the time you've told them the decision, you've probably already gone through your 5 phases. Okay. You're there. And so then as a business owner, you expect them to receive your news well when they haven't been a part of any of those conversations. Okay. And so if you are going through change, whether it's with your clients or whether it's with your employees or your contractors or even in life, if you can incorporate them in those conversations as appropriate as it is transparency level, that will help their phases of grief move along as well. If you're having to make a change, or if you're having to change your structure, change their account manager because you did a furlough or a layoff, whatever you can do within your comfort zone, but then also remembering that when you then announce that change, if you couldn't have that transparency for a lot of different reasons, believe me, I get that. You understand that the reaction initial is likely going to be negative. Okay. And you understand how to process that back of, this is how I got there and this is why, and being able to comfortably articulate that too.
Got it. Thanks for sharing. John, Olivia, you guys have anything to add? What do you think?
I always want to hear from Olivia. So
all right.
Full disclosure, I've tried to hire Olivia multiple times, so I always want to hear from Olivia. So please, Olivia, and I'll see if I have any thoughts left after you give me the answers.
Well, it hasn't not worked, so you can keep trying. I'm just joking. Okay, so my thoughts are, this is a time to be incredibly emotionally honest with your team. It's not the right time to posture, pretend you know the answers, or show bravado. And that's a very common thing in Silicon Valley. Christie's shaking her head. She's like, yes, too many tech bros with too much bravado. it's not going to work. People can see right through that. And the thing is, no one has any sense of what the answers are. No one is certain about the future. All the uncertainty that you feel as a leader, your team is just as uncertain. So it's better just to call the obvious and be very explicit about what you don't know, because pretending like you do know the answers will only give them the illusion, or the demonstration that you're delusional, because no one has the answers. That's the thing. And so what's most important is to build trust and rapport with your team. And a really great way to do this is to actually just be very honest with what's going on. Like, for example, we went through a hiring spree. I don't know who's hiring right now, but we were growing, and we had so many people apply to this one position, and we didn't even have the resources to be able to manage that hiring process efficiently. So instead of doing one-on-one interviews, we had to do a reverse interview. So we invited 50 people to come grill us, the employers, and flag us for red flags and ask us edgy questions about whether we're the right fit for them. And what we really had to say in the very beginning is, here's our vision, here's our mission, here's where we want to grow as a company. This is our big pie in the sky, big, hairy, audacious goal. But the reality is, every business like us is short on runway. And so we have 2 months at the best to be able to fund this role. We are looking at different sources right now. There's a possibility that the hours can increase, they can decrease, but at the very minimum, we can promise you these many hours at this salary. Are you still in the game? We still also have to kind of factor in that you're going to take on half the risk that we take on, because we don't know if this company is going to survive the pandemic. And that's not an easy conversation to have with anyone remotely. Like, you don't want to have that with your team, and you certainly don't want to have that conversation with new hires. But here's the thing, I need to tell these people this because it's their decision whether they want to take that risk on with us. It's an option. I can't force someone to do it. So I think it's really important to lead with love and compassion right now. Like, there's a reason why Jacinda Ardern, Prime Minister, right, of New Zealand, is getting so much media attention, is because she's genuinely, empathetically thinking about her people as her own customers and users. Like, she's government, so your users are your constituents. When we're in business, we often forget that our team, they are our users too. Like, if we're trying to make an impact in the world, why don't we focus with our team? Because those are the people who are spending 40 hours a week being with us. Those are the employees that are spending more time with us than their children, than their spouses, than their parents. And so it's really important right now to treat your team and your new hires with a lot of love and support and spaciousness. And it's kind of okay to tell them a story that you don't have the answers, but at least tell them, hey, we're not afraid of the worst case scenario because we've already identified it. So we're going to try a couple things. It may or may not work, but we're going to try it. And if it doesn't work, we'll try something else. We'll also learn every step of the way, and we'll adjust. And that is what I can promise you. And that's really all you can do as a leader in this time. That's it.
Absolutely. Staying authentic with the team is super. What do you think, John? What do you have to add?
No, I mean, I echo those sentiments. I mean, there's like 4 thoughts that I have. One is empathy. It's important to be an empathetic leader. The reality of it is whipping the lines on Ford Assembly on lines is just not the realistic way to get the best out of people. People do well when they're focused on success. And so I think this starts pre-pandemic, right? So once upon a time, we hired based on skills we thought we needed, skills we thought candidates had. And it turns out that that's a really crappy way to go about it. Instead, we really lead with our core values and try to find people that fit our core values. Some people call them core values. I call them unsaids, right? What are things that are people that are just unsaid on our team, right? What do they all get with? No one has to kind of explicitly say it. And a lot of those core values prepared us to kind of take on the pandemic in a real way. And so, number one, ultimately lead with empathy. You got to be a real human being. The second part of it, so I think is really important. I think Olivia hit this home really well. I remember exactly the conversation I had with our staff. I waited to have the conversation. I was reading emails and letters that were coming from friends in the Valley to friends at PE companies at Greenwich and everything in between. And so what you're left with is it was always, we're okay, we're fine. 3 days later, 20% of the staff was laid off. And so instead, I kept it real with the staff. I may have even used a few words that I probably am embarrassed to use in front of my daughter. But nonetheless, the conversation was real. It says, listen, I'm not here to give you assurance. No one's losing their job. And I can't provide any promises to anybody because I'm dealing with the same change that everyone else here is. But what I can promise you is that what we need now to be doing is to be doubling down, to be the best versions of ourselves. And it gave us an opportunity to refocus the staff and to really kind of reinvigorate them and to help them be part of the creation of the assurance that I think they were seeking. I think every employer was seeking from their CEO. Hey, do I have anything to worry about? And it's like, my message to them was not as long as you're working as hard as you can. And so I think that honesty and that transparency is super, 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 super important. Keeping it real is important. We have a number of our employees that are former veterans. They've sat behind sniper guns. They judge intent from thousands of yards away. They're going to be able to sniff my BS from a Teams call. And so, that was kind of the approach I took. I think there's some cool tools that are out there that can actually drive some data behind this. So at Framework, we use a tool called Office Vibe. We also use another tool called 15Five. And ultimately, it creates more structure to ensure some of the things that Ben hit on happen. So we're really big on trying to create, it's a huge part of our culture to ultimately correct bad behaviors when they come up, but ultimately also to reward and to provide praise in the moment. And creating, capturing that moment is really powerful for us, and trying to create it as a teaching moment throughout the organization. And so, some of these platforms, as we've gotten bigger, have kind of allowed us to create more structure for it and more cadence. And so, while Office Vibe is a little different than 15Five, if you will, it gave us at the end of the day data. And so Office Vibe measures the vibe in the office. And so pre-COVID, we had an 8.5 score, which is a pretty high score relative to it. I brag about that, not about anything else. But nonetheless, people are really happy about working at Framework. And the reality is it's now at 8.7. And so, I think if I was to maybe poll the crowd what they think happened, did it go up, did it stay the same, or did it go down? I think very few people would have thought that it went up. The reality of it is it came from, and we got the feedback. I laid out the plan that I laid out to management. I repurposed that memo to staff, and I created a real conversation around that. And the final thing I think, Ben, you also hit on was training. And so what we tried to do to really create not just training, but also collaboration is we put a mentorship program in place. We put some of our more senior folks with some of our more junior engineers. We've done that through all kind of departments in the organization. And so we're starting to see the fruits of that ultimately. So there's ways, there's tools out there that you can be using. And then there's a means of being able to be culturally committed to, honesty and real leadership and being empathetic. And I think those, all come from cultural perspective. And I think finding those types of people, which is why I kind of highlight our hiring process, if you will, made that discussion so much easier. It made everything kind of flow, and it created that honesty, and it allowed for that transparency.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing, John. If you guys the audience have any question, put in the chat also. John, you mentioned a couple of tools. If you don't mind kind of putting in the chat too, that would be great. If audience want to check it out, I see some people taking notes. Pretty helpful for them too. Switching gears just a little bit. I know this pandemic had changed the way we work. A lot of us, at least. For entrepreneurs, how do you guys deal with working, guess, from home now? How do you deal with work-life balance, if there's such thing still? Anything that you guys can share for our audience who are also in that situation, might not be struggling in that sense. What are your thoughts? Do I hear a hand? Do I see a hand? Kind of an auction out. Christie.
I struggle with the phrase of work-life balance because it implies perfection and balance, which is, I think, something that maybe brings out a lot of emotions in a lot of people about trying to be perfect or trying to have this, when really what we use the phrase, we try and restructure people to say like work-life integration, right? We're not going to get rid of these things. We're not going to get rid of other things that my Apple Watch also buzzes me too. Don't get me started on that. It drives me batty, but I love it all the same. I have this relationship with it. And so I think having a work-life integration and encouraging healthy boundaries with people, right? Where if what is causing somebody to reply to emails at 6 a.m., or are they just a morning person and now they work from home and they have that luxury? what about somebody who's replying at 10 p.m. at night? Are they having bad boundaries, or are they really more of a night owl and this is just how they've always functioned, and now they don't feel the need to put the, I don't know if anybody else here has used like the email sender where it sends at a specific time so you don't look batshit crazy. Hand raised. I got it, because I'm a morning person and people find that very disturbing. I got up at 4:40 to do actually a CrossFit class that's out of Washington, D.C. Highly recommend if you're looking for a studio to do. We couldn't recommend this one more, but that's who I am. And it's not to me crazy. That's just who I am. I'm a morning person. So I think it's then opening those conversations with your employees, your colleagues, the people of, if this is working for you and these kind of alternative hours are working and there's not a performance issue or a compliance and behavior issue, at what point are you then, as either an entrepreneur, still stuck in your it's my way or the highway, and warming up to that change, that as you grow and have people, you are going to have to change to their working styles. And it might not be your way, but the client is still happy, or whoever else is on the other end of your spectrum is still happy. What matters more?
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else want to jump in? Not yet. One thing. So, Ben, do you want to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess a few things. One, working for somebody, this is a really great time. We've been talking about communication a lot. This is a really great time for you to communicate to your managers or leaders what you need. I so often, you look at someone's schedule and it's just back-to-back Zoom meetings or something like that. And it's okay to start a meeting 10 after, right? It's okay to not have a meeting for 30 minutes or 60 minutes. It's okay to have a 40-minute meeting or a 20-minute meeting. And especially in the virtual world, 30 minutes can feel like 2 hours. So communicate, as an associate to your manager, what you need and maybe what you might see could improve, right? Your current work life at home. And meetings is a huge part of that. I mirror everything that Christie said in terms of, when you work. I work on the weekends, right? I sometimes work at 11 or 12 o'clock. I work through my mind in terms of like when I'm inspired. But I also know the things that I do that bring the greatest ROI. So this is a great opportunity for you if you feel like you're working all the time, and to sit back and say, okay, what really moves the needle in my business? And if you need to test more things to figure out what that is, if you don't have the data for that, well, collect data. John probably likes that statement, but collect data to see what actually moves the needle. But if you don't know, start doing a bunch of mini tests. This is a great opportunity for you to just portion things out to see what works and what doesn't work, but then put constraints on it. Like if you are unhappy and exhausted with your computer, with the light, like the luminescent, screen hitting your face at 1 a.m., then set boundaries for yourself, right? Give yourself a shutdown period. You are responsible for how much you work. Even if you're not an entrepreneur, even if you are working for somebody else, you are literally responsible for how much you work. The only person that can basically take away your boundaries are you. So this is a great opportunity for you to, one, communicate with your leadership, but also then to look at the work you're doing if you're an entrepreneur and say, what if I'm working too much, then I'm not working the right way, and what can I do potentially to basically be more efficient and effective. And so real skill sets, because I forgot about those. I was overloaded, right? I felt I was working too much when kind of COVID hit, and I work remote normally. But it was like just the fact that I couldn't go out to the gym and break up my day. I couldn't go out for a drink with the friends. I had no reasons not to work. So I literally just ended up working all the time. And more people were available to have conversations, and there were more opportunities for virtual events. And it was just like, it was like literally just like all the boundaries and structure that I created for myself with work disappeared overnight. And that was my fault. And it took me a little bit of time to get used to, okay, so how do I create structure? I bought a new rug. I bought a new work desk. I bought a new monitor. I sectioned off my work area from the rest of my apartment. I have now work mats where I workout mats where I only work out. Right now it's nicer out, so I can go for runs and break up my day. Like if I'm working, I'm drinking out of like one water bottle and not the other water bottle. Like I have triggers in my environment to say, Ben, you're working. Ben, you're not working. Ben, you're working out. Ben, you're not working out. So it's really helpful in terms of flicking those switches and creating some semblance of control and structure over my work life and personal life.
Yeah, that's so true. I think screen burnout is real. I've experienced it last month. I didn't know because I'm in digital too, so I look at screen all the time. And man, I tell you, since the pandemic at home, I need to shut it down to unplug, and that's so real. Absolutely. John, Olivia, do you guys have anything you want to add about work-life balance or lack of it? Working from home now these days.
I love teachers. I love teachers. You know, I've realized that the reason why there isn't a hedge fund appreciation week is because they're not underpaid. Teachers, I don't care where they are on the planet. I don't care what the average salary is. They are underpaid. This all resonates for me as a parent. It's the only really thing I care about, generally speaking, when I really think about it. And man, it is so hard to like, be a parent and to be working at this time. My wife is a physician, and so it was a little bit trickier. It was a little bit manageable at first in terms of being able to drive a semblance of juggling. Hey, when do you need to do this? When can I do that? And it sucked, and it wasn't working. The reality of it is it worked at least enough. Now that my wife's back to work, especially as a healthcare worker, it's really changed that significance. And so we've relied on daycare, an emergency daycare that has opened up with state guidelines, et cetera, and we've had to actually like take on and accept some level of risk to be able to try to pursue this. So it's become a real personal thing for us. In terms of level, how that's, I think that experience that I'm dealing with at home is really created, even though I like to think of myself as an empathetic and real leader, and I like to think of the relationship I have with our team as really, really strong. Like, the reality of it is it's changed my perspective in trying to offer support. I don't have all of the answers, but I can tell you that we've spent a lot of time and a lot of money recently trying to figure out ways to kind of help people manage this perspective of juggling, children specifically. So just kind of taking it from a parent's perspective, because I think everything everyone else added was great. It's been probably the biggest challenge in my life as an entrepreneur, to be frank. And I love teachers, in case I didn't mention that. I really, really love teachers.
Thanks, John. I think you have. Olivia, anything to add?
Yeah, as always, I'm going to take this in a different direction. So I think when we talk about work-life balance, the goal isn't to work with this like shitty system that it was never meant to work for you, which means you go to work for 8 hours, you are one person while you're at work, your head is down, you do your thing. You're probably not that excited, you're stressed, you're tired, you're fatigued, only to come home to wash the dishes, take care of your kids, fold the laundry, go grocery shopping, try to give your partner some kind of love. Like, this system was not made to work for us. And so when I hear work-life balance, like, I'm with Christie, like, integration is great, but like, what about finding a career where you don't have to be so sharply schismed between your work personality and your real personality? Like, why do we have to go home and only feel comfortable when we can turn Netflix on and be like, wow, the workday is over, the laptop is shut. Like, our life now starts from the moment that begins. Like, to me, that's not good enough. So what I really love about what's happening here, I know it's very challenging for a lot of people, but this is a time of transition. You get to choose who you become now and after this pandemic, right? Like, we get to choose who we are leaving this quarantine. And so I really want people to think about, like, are you in a career that you love? Are you in a job where you are excited to grow yourself? Like, could you visualize yourself doing this for the next 10 to 20 to 30 years? And if the answer is no, that's perfectly fine. Like, I'm not asking you to be committed to this one vision, because we are evolutionary creatures. But, I really do want to recommend and suggest that try to find a job or career that makes you happy to be there, because if you're not happy, you will never achieve work-life balance, because you have to be fundamentally two different people. And then when you're not fighting yourself and there's not this big schism, this dichotomy of Olivia at work from 9 to 5 and Olivia after, who's a totally different person, who likes to drink with her friends and go to festivals and be young and, whatever. When that person isn't such a distinct schism and it's actually one integrated person, then I get to roll up to my job at 10 a.m. in the morning, 9 a.m., whatever it is, and actually just relax into the work. And it feels like flow. And it feels like I can just be a wholesome person doing my thing. And 2 o'clock is just as enjoyable as 9 p.m. that evening. Try to find that kind of integration where you don't have to fragment parts of you. And I think that's really important because we're going to work for a long time, guys. So you might as well enjoy it. Like, you're going to be working for a long, long time. Just make sure the choice that you make now is going to be the one that you're going to appreciate later down the road.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just like to add into that real quick, because I think it's important to note. Yes, like if you're in a professional, if you're working for somebody else, and you get asked to maybe send like an admin email, but you're a director, you're going to be like, why am I basically doing the dishes right now at work, and be pretty unhappy about that potentially, right? But if you have to send that admin email and you're an entrepreneur, like that can have a very different feeling internally. But I will say, like, because I work with basically with career pivots and fulfillment, like there's going to be days where you're not going to want to work. There are going to be days where you're not going to like what you're doing, but it does, right, minimize that a lot more. And so I think it's really important. Like if you're not in a career that you're finding fulfilling, or you're not aligned with your values, like now is the time, right? Or crisis is the time to figure out, like, okay, so maybe where do I want to go? Like, what do I want to do? What really does matter to me as an individual? What impact do I want to have on the world? And start taking steps to get there. But also realize that, like, when you're there, like working, like a lot of times is also still work, right? There's going to be things that you're going to have to do that you might not actually want to do, but it's going to be a lot easier to get in touch with the meaning behind it, right? To find the motivation for it, and to almost like, give yourself excuses why you should be doing it in a way. So I just want to note that it's still very easy to overwork, right? I just kind of did that, or to do, have work that maybe you don't find, even if you find fulfilling, you don't want to do. So it's important to find, like, okay, so then, what do I need to do to recharge, right? What is draining my energy right now? And actually to write those things out, and then surround yourself with them, right? If you know that the certain client is draining, then like, put buffers before and afterwards to fill your cup back up. And so really bringing a level of awareness to where you're losing your energy, where your boundaries are being kind of dismantled, and then figuring out action steps to actually like re-energize yourself and reconnect with that meaning and that fulfillment.
Absolutely. And I want to remind our audience, we'll be opening up the floor for you guys very soon. So if any questions, get ready. All right, we will be opening up to the floor. I want to take a little bit deeper onto working from home. A lot of us have teams that are working remotely now, right? How do you guys manage remote teams? It's getting more and more common. It's going to be around for a long, long time, it seems like. Any thoughts for entrepreneur that maybe not familiar with working with their teams remotely or virtually? Any thoughts on that?
I think one of the first things that you have to do is operate from trust. Yes, it sounds very hippie. I do yoga, whatever. But you got to operate from trust right now. That I really do think, and even in my business where we deal with people and we deal with some not great elements of people in HR, 95% or more of people are friggin' awesome, and they just might not know how to communicate or tell you what's going on. And so if you operate from a place of trust, and even if you are the opposite, if you're the employee with the manager who's remote, who's not being communicative, if you operate from a place of trust that they know you're there, you know you're there, and you have to be assertive right now of what you need as an employee or as a manager. Of, I need 5 minutes on Slack video chat every morning just to know that you're there and you've signed in, and being as transparent enough to say that. I need you to remember to update the friggin' project management system at the end of the day, because it drove me crazy when we were in the office, and I could walk by your office and tell you it drove me crazy, but now I can't. And so I need you to actually do that, and to put a half hour on your day at 4:30 p.m., 5 o'clock p.m., your local time, of the tasks you've checked off. Not that I've said this to anybody on my team, but it's like whatever your tick was or something that bothered you about somebody, you have to be comfortable to articulate it in an emotionally intelligent way. But if you operate from trust, most of the time it will not do you wrong. And just remember, we're all doing our best. But if there's something that feels weird or that it might fester, The sooner you bring it up and get it out there, the better off you'll be. That's free life advice too, people. This is for relationships as well.
Trust is everything. I like that. I like that. What do you guys think?
Yeah. Okay. Working from home, everything is asynchronistic, meaning you don't get the chance to just have that water cooler talk. You can't just walk into someone's office and say, hey, like, what are you doing? You have to be really thoughtful about how you ask people for their time, and then what you do when you're not together in the same room. So like Christie said, like something I just thought about is you have to be your own project manager right now. Own your learning curve, be responsible for the outcomes, and now you have permission to hound people. Like if you need something done and two people have to be contributing to it, it's okay to like ping them repeatedly because you need to get your thing done and no one else is going to be managing that outcome. Something else that I wrote down is I have a friend right now who's about to leave her job. She is so fed up with her work culture. She's only been employed at this company for 1 month and the company is horrendous. They have just the most offensive meeting culture in the world. I'm not going to name the company and out them, but what the company does is they have a meeting culture where the CEO and the CMO runs a meeting over by 2 hours every single day. They start late, they end late, they invite all people. There's not even a culture where you can decline the meeting if it's not valuable to you. It doesn't exist. And so she came to me and she's like, can you please build out this thing? Because I've been working on a product called Death to the Meetings. So anyone here who is just really tired of bad meeting culture, there's an acronym. It's called WTM. If you can't figure it out by writing it out in an email or a Slack, then you move on to the next thing, which is to talk it out. Most likely you can solve a lot of problems in a one-on-one sync. You grab someone on the phone, 5 minutes, it's over, done. If you cannot progress through writing and talking, then you have a meeting. But the majority of companies around the world, and me being a consultant having access to them, knows that people typically jump over writing and talking straight to meeting when they don't have experience running a remote team. And that's very damaging to the morale of your team. Like who wants to be in a meeting from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. with no blocks in between? That's my friend. And she's about to leave her career because of it. So be really thoughtful if you're a manager or you're a leader. How many meetings are you scheduling? Could you schedule your meetings at 2 p.m. after your employees have had the highest peak performance hours, the highest cognitive energy, and they've been able to actually work on the projects that need to move forward because they're mission critical. So like being really thoughtful about when do we meet? Can we make it a Slack message? Can it be an email? Does it have to be a meeting? If it's a meeting, who can decline? Can we suggest and invite people to decline meetings that they don't need to be a part of because we're paying them, salary by the hour? We should be reserving their talent for the most critical aspects. And I think if any remote team working from home can nail and optimize the meeting, you will be very successful as a company. But a poor meeting culture could really send people running in the opposite direction.
Absolutely. That's a really good point, guys. Anybody want to add anything? I'll share one thing. Like for us, David is at our company, so he's in the audience right now. So one thing that we work with remote team is like we have a check-in, so that every day there's like a impromptu check-in. So we don't have to wait for somebody to get together to talk about. Just at your own time, you can check in. And we have a weekly meeting for a specific division so that we can compile all the conversation that's not urgent at that one meeting. And we know we'll be talking about that at a specific time anyway. So we can sort of just reduce the number of meetings that we have as a company. I have found it really, really helpful too. Absolutely. So anybody else want to share managing and working with your team remotely?
I think Christie hit on, trust, and trust the people you work with to do their jobs. Trust first. If they're not doing their jobs, then you can figure out what you need to do next. But trust first. If you need awareness of what everyone is doing as a leader, I understand the idea of like a business continuity spreadsheet, right? Where everyone's kind of listing what they're doing and such like that. But don't create that and then let people go because then you're just stealing trust from your associates, because they might have thought then that you just compiled all that information to see who was expendable or who could do other work, etc. So really, watch your actions, watch the order of your actions. If you know you're going to actually have to create, have cuts, then what are you doing prior to that to either create trust or take away trust? I highly recommend structured communication from leadership to associate, but then unstructured from associate to leader. So, basically make sure that the associate can communicate at any time through the technology. So you have technology for that, if it's text message, if it's Slack, if it's Teams, even if it's email, and then structured communication as in like weekly check-ins. And feel free to give time back, right? So if you have a meeting and it's an hour and you're done within 20 minutes, give that time back. Don't try to fill that time aimlessly. And then highly recommend connectivity exercises. You may call them icebreakers, but take 5 to 10 minutes and do something fun. Use the time that you have to connect with your team, to connect with, to just really get to know each other a little bit more, and don't just jump into the work. When you're working in person, it's so easy to have that connection just through presence and through, dead time within a meeting. And too often, I think we skip that in the remote workforce. And so make sure you build that in as an agenda item.
I want to echo off of what Ben's saying, that one-on-ones and weekly meetings are crucial, but keep track of your agenda items, people, because you also know how frustrating it is that you've been asking your manager for something for weeks, and for 4 weeks they said we'll get to it next week. Be accountable for holding your own agenda too, of like, hey, you've blown off this question about if I can move to Tahiti and work remotely from there for the rest of my life for 4 weeks now, and I want an answer. That's just the hypothetical. But keeping control too from your side as an employee is really appreciated on management, but also just empowers you in your career. And, keeping track of those items so that they don't get lost, because that is so deflating of something you care about or something you wanted to talk to your manager or your boss about, and it either gets kicked to the curb or off the agenda. And having that kind of documentation is really important. I will also say, I also echo what Ben said about icebreakers, and think outside the box, people. We're not talking about 2 truths and a lie. We're talking about be real. So something we did at 4 Point was we actually had people break into groups and tell us what their dream, no cost limit, dream 5-course dinner would be. And they had to come to consensus in their little groups of 3 or 4 people. And it was really awesome, because in those dream 5-course dinners, people brought up the trips they had of their lives, their honeymoons, their children's favorite foods, the foods that people that passed on in their lives used to cook for them from the countries they were originally from before they became Americans. It was awesome to get to know people like that. And so if an icebreaker sounds kind of silly or weird, please do a little more Googling, because there's a lot of other things out there that can really build you as people.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. Anybody want to jump on this question? Not yet. Well, I'm about to open up the floor to everybody. So if anybody have a question, feel free to pop it in the chat, and I think we can enable your mic and videos. Let's see if anything here. Not yet. So just extra incentive. So if those of you don't know about Gray, we have lifestyle brand for entrepreneurs. So to swing the deal, if anybody asks a question today, we're giving out $10 gift card to our store. So if you're an entrepreneur, you can ask a very specific question to these rockstar founders, and who knows, they might give you some really, really good unexpected answers. Let me just ask one question that I have personally to kick this off. How's that? It's not on the agenda, guys. So I'm always wondering, as an entrepreneur, when you think back when you first starting your journey, how did you start finding your first or second mentor? I think that's always been my little struggle at the beginning. How do you identify them when you just started maybe the first 6 months? I'm just curious, what was the journey like for you guys?
I want to take this one actually first. I usually want to steal an answer from Olivia and Christie because that's my pathway to success. But all joking aside, I think mentorship is viewed in way too formal a sense for too many people, in my estimation. So a couple quick thoughts. In my experience, I've learned more from those I've mentored than I think that they've likely learned from me. One of those relationships is our COO. And so Ross is has been a friend for about 15, almost probably 17 years now. And a lot of our relationship for most of our life was me mentoring him. And now he's my partner. And I think one of the killer reasons why we win at Framework. And so just one tad bit on mentorship. It's not so formal. It's not like it's just this one directional learning experience. I think you learn being a mentor as much as you learn being a mentee a lot of times. That's been my experience. The other part of it is like, so one of my mentors formally, I think in the way people would look at it, was one of my investors and board members ultimately. But like that was really, in we have like a lot of like relationships. We're friends, we're partners, right? I call him for advice. Maybe he sees me as a mentor in other areas of their life. And so I think the idea of like this labeled like Warren Buffett mentor or like Charles Schwab to Andrew Carnegie type like relationship of mentorship is just like too bombastic, and it's like it's not real. And so I think what I like, I'm sure Olivia and Christie have additional thoughts and split on this, but I think the two things that I'd want to label or I'd like want to try to share in this particular example is that like it's so much easier and more real, and it's not as formal as I think most people need it to be. But I do think there's a respect level and a seriousness that goes into that. And so what I found is that people were more willing to mentor me because I was serious about me, because I was serious about what I was doing, because they took and saw value in what I was preparing, and they wanted to be helpful to someone that was really wanting to help themselves. And so that's a lot of the perspective that I have on mentorship, but I don't want to hold this up and be a vacuum here.
John, you sell yourself short, dude. You really do. That was really good. I echo that of like, if you think there's somebody who could be a mentor to you, I mean, it's like a weird version of professional online dating, right? Like you don't want to go on the first date and be like, I want to get married, because that would be weird. You want to go in with some transparency of I'm looking for this. And this is actually a really timely question, Anson, because I felt like I've had some really great mentors in my life, but navigating a 20-person professional services firm is different than most of my mentors, which are in the SaaS or tech or other spaces, and a services firm is very different. And I recently had one come across my plate, and I did, after meeting him, originally it was actually on a sales pitch for like either co-pitching or being a backup to his consulting firm. Imagine that, a backup. But I was cool with that because of who I thought that was great, actually. And so I contacted the person and said, hey, I'd really like to talk to you just one-on-one without your whole team present, not in a sales standpoint. I'd really like to tell you more about some other things. And I came in prepared of, here's what I admire about the things you've done with your company, and here's where I'm at as a 37-year-old CEO, and here are the things that I'm thinking about. And he was like, oh my gosh, I'm totally into this. Like, this is such a compliment. I'd love to talk. And we ended up staying on the phone for like 90 minutes, which in our Calendly, we had only booked 30. So you can imagine the sacrilegiousness that went down on that. And so it was truly joyful. And then after that, though, too, the person who originally introduced us, I did write them a very genuine thank you note of, this has meant something to me, and I think this might even mean something to my life and my company. And like, you should know that you connected me with a potential mentor, and I appreciate that. So keep making the connections you make. I think that's an important extra step too. It's also saying thank you, not just to the mentor or the person who's taking time for you, but even to the people that have connected you to them.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed and I learned is a lot of time when you ask for advice and you execute on that advice, let that person know. And I think one weird scenario that I've seen is people asking me for ideas, advice, and never heard back. Like, what happened? like follow up. I want to know, like I'm invested now, right? Like that's a great idea. You should try it. And then like I ran into that person like 5 years later. It would tell me, oh, that was good. I did this. And it's like, I would so much appreciate it if you let me know. I felt like I was following like a TV show and then like it just stopped, right? So if you have a mentor, I think we definitely keep him or her updated on your progress. I think they would appreciate it too. Yeah. Anybody else want to jump on this questions?
That's so interesting you just said that, Anson. I wrote an article on LinkedIn, or it was a post, but it was exactly about how people generally just don't follow up. And that's really the biggest pity, because best relationship building happens in the follow-up. It doesn't have to be elaborate. It doesn't even have to be an essay. You could literally say, hey, Anson, I talked to Ben. It was great. We're chatting next week. Like, that's it. But it builds that casual relationship that can endure years and company changes and layoffs and reorgs. So that's awesome. I have a lot of thoughts about mentorship. The first thing is everyone wants a mentor with a capital M. Like, we all are looking for that one person who can give us everything. Someone who can teach us digital marketing, someone who could show us how to build the legal status of our organization, someone who could bring us through our first IPO and also be the therapist that we lean on when we have our first divorce. Like, we're looking for the all-encompassing mentor, but that person doesn't exist. It's a lot like trying to find the love of your life. And when you find that person, you're like, wait, you're not my chef, and you're not my maid, and you're not my therapist, and you're not my confidant. Like, what's the deal? Like, you were supposed to be my everything. And I think we've come to realize that. And so what has really worked for me is, like, I actually have had no mentors in my adult life that I've actually genuinely really appreciated. And that's a whole nother story. But what I have found is a patchwork solution where I find friends who are really smart, like colleagues, peers, managers, people who are not even in my industry, and they're maybe 1 or 2 or 3 steps ahead of me, and we form a study group. And we're like, hey, you're doing this thing, I'm doing this thing, want to compare notes. And I have a consultancy. So the first 4 years I built a consultancy. No one tells you that you don't make money. No one tells you this. They don't tell you. So how do you find out? And you're wondering, like, what are those people doing over there? You check your competitors' websites, and you realize when you actually talk to people, because they now are your peers, that everyone's breaking even. And also, I've built, groups of consultants. I've built groups of people who want to study digital marketing. I've built groups of just like founders trying to get through founder problems. And that's kind of what has worked for me. It might not work for you. Maybe you do have that Warren Buffett figure. And if you do, I'm jealous. So just let me know where to find more of people like that, because I'm looking. So if anyone wants to be a mentor to me, just let me know. I'm sure there's a lot of qualified people on this call.
Well, it seems like we have some rockstar entrepreneurs here. So if attendees want to reach out to the panelists, create a conversation, that could be beginning of something too, right? I think we have one.
I would just like to add one thing. Yeah. I love, Olivia, what you just said, because I think we glorify this idea of mentorship. And it's like, this person is going to be there for me all the time, every day. They're going to give me all the answers, when in reality, like, a mentor, if you're lucky, you get to talk to once a month, and you might not even have something that they really need to support every single month. But I totally like love what you said in terms of, you're almost looking for like problem solvers. They're not exactly mentors, but they're people with different opinions, with ideas. Maybe they've already done it, because, even what someone tells you, a lot of times, like, are you actually going to do it? And is it right for you? And so sometimes, like, mentorship is just kind of an excuse for you to take action, but a really good mentor is someone that's there to hopefully just listen to you and guide you. And to find that type of person can take some effort, can take some time, other than just like the problem solving people. But I will tell you, over the years of my LinkedIn networking and prospecting, I've come across probably 3 people that I know if I send an email to, they will make time for me, even on the weekend, just for 30 minutes just to chat. And those, like, I can't even say that they've led me to anything significant other than the fact that I know that they're there as a resource to be able to reach out to. And they've just achieved so much in their lives. And I think just knowing that is really nice to have, but but that's what I guess I would define as a mentor. When in actuality, what I've needed and what's been really influential throughout my career are these problem solvers and these mastermind groups and things like that. So it's good to have both, but also to like understand, you know, how you define what a mentor is and what is really the purpose of having that, and can you find that in other ways as well.
It's very good. It's very good. Thank you, Ben. We have one question from our audience. Sierra, are you there with us still? You're on mute now.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. So just kind of in line with what you guys are saying, I'm an entrepreneur and I also do consulting. And one of the things that I'm struggling with in, I guess, finding a mentor or a coach is that I believe I'm on the right path based on kind of my projections, based on what I want to do for my branding, my business model. But then I kind of get wrapped up when I see maybe other companies or consultants and groups that I'm with that are, you know, a little bit more profitable or doing things a little bit better. So I'm kind of questioning myself, like, do I need to get a mentor to keep me more accountable? And maybe there's some things that I'm not seeing that maybe they can identify, or maybe there's gaps in my process that will allow me to be more profitable. And so I'm really kind of, you know, I'm listening to your feedback, and I think it's great what you're saying about different kinds of mentors and what you're looking for. But at what point do you just kind of trust your gut, just stay on the path that you're on, versus investing in time and finding someone to kind of help do that gap analysis for your business?
So I'd like to take this one because what I'm hearing is broader than a mentorship issue. You know, I think it's really specific. Like when I'm, you know, when I view the mentorship discussion, at least as I'm asked to kind of engage with folks, a lot of times it's not mentorship that someone's looking for from me. It's consulting that they might be looking for from me, and I think it's an important distinction to draw. So I think when you're going to ask a mentor, or if you're being formal in that way, I think it's important to be like specific about what you're looking to get out of that and why you think that that person might be helpful to you in doing so. And I think a really good way of doing that is like demonstrating value and being helpful to them and showing them what you're up to. But I think like trying to find like the secret sauce mentor to solve this problem isn't necessarily the approach that I would take. Now, if there happens to be someone that you think could be helpful in tackling these questions, perhaps because they're at a more advanced stage, or for whatever reason that you think they might be helpful to your specific problem, then I think that might be a worthwhile investment of your time. But I think there's lots of ways to being able to solve some of what you're dealing with. And then I think kind of perspective, I think Olivia kind of hit on this a minute ago, and you're sharing some of these sentiments around like, you know, what everyone else is doing. And oftentimes when I'm on a panel, I always get the question like, kind of, well, how are you different from your competitors, or what are you doing different from competitors? And like, I'm so focused on me.
Oh.
We lost him.
I think focusing on
he was
himself.
gonna say he's so focused on
He's
himself.
focused on himself, that's all. So
That was a perfect place for that to time out. I love that.
Because he's handling his stuff right now. That's what he has to do.
I love it.
why
Well,
wait
John
for
and I
Jonathan?
are very, very synced. I feel like we're soul brother and sister. So I'll just pick off where he left off, because I think I knew where he was going with this. But there's like a thing a yoga teacher once said to me, because I'm from California. We're all on our yoga mats, and the teacher was like, don't look to your neighbor to lead you. Like, lead yourself through the motion. Because if you ever look up at a yoga class and you see everyone looking around at each other, you're like, they're all lost. Everyone's lost. No one's going to be able to finish the flow. So that's a lot like in business. You can look to your competitors for motivation, to kind of get a pulse read on what they're doing. But ultimately, if you keep following in their footsteps, you will lose your uniqueness, which is the thing that you need to set out to actually discover.
I also want to jump in and say, like, Ciara, you had said a few times about profitability, competitors being more profitable. And I have a very basic question of, do you know what you're worth, and are you charging enough? And I say this from such a place of love of when I first started HR consulting, and this is true, I made $60,000 a year as an HR manager in Chicago. And so I started charging people $30 an hour. Fail state. That is not what you should charge people. But that is, truth be told, like where I started my entrepreneur journey. and have learned a lot along the way about how to charge people and everything else. But that's more my question to you as well, Tiara, to just pause it back to you of like when you talked about profitability or competitors who might not, it sounded like there's a little edge in the voice of like, they're not as good as you are. If you could figure out what they're charging and what you should be charging, or get brave and have a customer finally say to you, you're too expensive, you know, that could be a really valuable exercise for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think, you know, your question, it really did come off like there was more to just that question, right? It was, you know, how are you valuing yourself? Do you know your worth? What are you charging? Like, you know, comparison of others and such. But to focus on more so like the actual, like, so some of the bulk of the question in terms of like, when should I hire a coach? And, you know, I think coaches can really create great outcomes, right? The right coach can create great outcomes, especially, you know, depending on if you actually feel stuck, because, you know, you have your experience, you have your knowledge, and you have your platforms and your message, and you're very much invested in that yourself. Like that could be your identity, right? This is what you've created. And sometimes that might not be what your target market or what you think your target market wants. And maybe your coach can help you solidify that and clarify that and actually help you with sales. And I mean, there are specific coaches, right? I've hired different types of coaches in my past, and, you know, my message was great. My content was great. I was providing a great service, but I actually needed greater reach, you know? So it's like, I hired a sales coach, and it took my business to like another level. And I know speakers. I know people that, you know, their whole livelihood are workshops. They hired a speaker coach, and all of a sudden now they've literally like 10x'd what they charge, and people are buying it. So in terms of like, you know, when to hire a coach, it's, you know, have you been consistent? Have you tried multiple different avenues to make something work? You know, and is kind of this, you know, are you looking to level up, or are you trying to find a solution that you can't find? Like those are kind of times where maybe you can try to find a coach. You know, have you exhausted resources, right? Have you looked at podcasts and videos and articles? You know, Discover Gray has great articles on entrepreneurship. You should check them out. Anson can direct you there. Have you looked for a mentor, right? Because there's a lot of reasons to hire a coach and a lot of reasons not to hire a coach. But if that's like, I would say, you know, as a coach, I will turn people away that I'm not going to be able to help 100%. And I think that the right coach will guide you towards resources that could help you. And that might not be that coach itself. And I know that I've kind of given you a variety of different answers and went on a couple different branches, but hopefully some of it's been helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. One other question that we had was, what was the worst piece of advice you have gotten as an entrepreneur? And I know there are a lot of like pep talk and hustle talk out there. Like what is the thing that you heard? It was like, this is ridiculous, guys. Like what is it? I think.
Welcome back, John. Do you want to take this?
I just want, I'm like most things in my life, I'm just trying to survive. But thank you. No, I my initial thought is, thank God I couldn't think of anything initially, Anson. Was my initial thought. I have some great pieces of advice that I think have come through. But maybe the gleaning point is maybe forget that terrible advice if you can. But yeah, I honestly can't think of a terrible piece of advice. I like to think that I've probably gotten a lot of bad advice. I like to think I've listened to it and evaluated why I've come to why it was bad advice, but nothing really comes to mind. Thank you, as always, for putting me on the spot, Olivia. I appreciate that.
Anybody else want to answer that question from our audience?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at this.
Yeah.
I think we have to be really careful about the advice that we receive and be discerning about whether we take it to heart, because some advice is not meant to empower you. Some advice that you'll get from people is meant to keep you in your place. And I had to learn that. So when you think about what people are saying to you, take it with a grain of salt. Think about the worldview that it comes from. Think about the perspective. Think about the goal and the intention. A lot of people love giving advice, but they don't give great advice. That's just one sort of facet of this. And I'd say the worst advice that I ever got was that you have to kill yourself to be successful. Like one of my old mentors told me that you have to grind really hard. You have to do what other people are not willing to do to become the person that really lives at the top of the mountain with their like 8-figure home and yacht. Like he was just painting this picture. And I actually think that's not true whatsoever. I don't think you have to struggle to learn. It's a big misconception. You can actually live a different life. You have to create a new reality from a new paradigm, a new mindset, but it doesn't have to be that you kill yourself, lose your soul, get divorced, have your kids hate you to be someone who is admirable and successful in the world. I can't believe that anymore.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Christie, Ben?
Yeah, and in terms of advice, I think it's always important to remember that it is advice. It is someone telling you what they think you should do. It is not what you should do. And it is not finding out, right, what might be best for you. And it's not finding out what you have done and what maybe would, it's literally like someone's opinion. And so I can't really pick out something that's been like the worst piece of advice, because I've always labeled advice as just a suggestion, right? There's no right way. And I can't even say that there's ever really, bad advice, because advice, again, is an opinion. And is it right for you? Is it wrong for you? Like that's for you to figure out. But, just to kind of take this in maybe a different direction for a moment, I analyzed how I made decisions, and I've hosted a couple workshops on decision making. And I think we don't spend enough time reviewing how we've made decisions in our lives. And I had a tendency to always ask people for advice on any major decision. I would have to get 4 or 5 people's opinions, and then I would use their opinions to feel more confident about the decision I wanted to make, And so it's like, why are you really even asking for advice? I just spend some time and take a look at how you're making decisions, why you're seeking advice, and is that advice even going to actually impact the final decision that you make? I realized that my polling of experts didn't lead to any difference in what I was actually going to decide. I was just basically creating a week of anguish for myself and wasting hours of people's times, So I changed how I made decisions, and now I don't seek advice or opinions. I really just sit down and figure out what's best for myself.
I've got one too. So the first few years of my business, people kept telling me, Christie, you need to focus. Pick an industry, pick talent or recruiting or HR. I said, no. Small to mid-market sized businesses are looking for one service provider they can trust. And that's my thing, is consulting firms build these huge retainers, and search firm, they build these huge commissions. Like, how can you think it's a genuine relationship? Our whole value system is trust and partnership, and that we care about you and your company and your people right along with you. And I did. For the first 2 years, I had people tell me that was stupid. And I listened to myself instead. And then last year when we hit 2.2 million, I laughed just a little bit. And that's okay. And to trust your gut, especially if you know it's right and you're using data like John talked about. I track data like a sociopath. That's my awkward. I'm not even good at it. But we have software that tracks our data, and we have, other ways we track our sales pipelines and trusted people at the firm. But if you know what you're doing is right and true, and you've even got data to support you, then I say, it's okay to ignore some advice, because then you're innovating and then you're thinking outside the box, and then you're getting uncomfortable. And I'm very proud to say that over the last few months, we have won executive searches away from Spencer Stewart. Spencer Stewart, a name I never could have thought we played ball with, but we are just as good as someone like that is, who has global offices. And yes, listening to your own sound about what your mission is absolutely worthwhile.
That's fantastic. That's really good. Thank you, Christy. So look at the time. It's 5 minutes to the end of the event. So I do want to thank everybody for joining. And I know we have a really good-looking crowd here today. So if anyone that want to turn on their cameras, we'd love to take a virtual group photos, guys. So I'm gonna give 3 minutes for people to kind of, situate it, good lighting. If anyone wants to turn on the camera, we love it. We want to get some virtual group shot. We all need some human connection right now, right, guys? All right, I see some nods. Awesome. All right, let me see other people popping up. Great. Hi. See, we have a good crowd. While we're waiting for the camera turning on, panelists, any final thoughts on our fellow entrepreneurs out there going through this unexpected change? What do you want to say to them while they're showing up their faces now?
Business is cyclical. It's true. Life is cyclical too.
Right.
And sometimes you do have to wait for the other side. I can't come up with the saying right now, but like the journey, the destination is not the point, the journey is, right? Sorry, I'm not being as prophetic as I should be right now, but it is cyclical, and there are other sides, there are different sides, and hang in there. And if you need support, reach out and be transparent saying you need support.
All right, thank you for sharing. So I'm gonna just count to 3, and we can also get screenshots. Are we ready? 3, 2, 1. Screenshot time. All right, so we're on to that. But thank you so much for coming. I want to really appreciate our panelists for sharing your time with us, and Ben, thank you for putting this together for us too.
Yeah, and just to let everyone know, I'll be sending a follow-up email with all the panelists' information and some links that they would love all of you to be informed about, maybe some resources as well. So thank you all so much for joining us. And really, if you do have follow-up questions for the panelists, they are very, very open to connecting and receiving them. So feel free to reach out to them individually as well. Thank you again to everyone. Literally, this has been incredible and like the highlight of my week. So thank you.
Ditto. Jazz hands.
Bye, guys.
Take care, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
All right. Stay safe.